Roll, please. Start the camera and take the roll.
For Senate Appropriations, March 31st, 9 a.m. meeting. Senator Guru.
Here.
Senator Hicks.
Here.
Senator Kinski.
Here.
Senator Steinmetz. Chairman Perkins.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. So we, yesterday we have two bills this morning. The first one for our consideration is House Bill 219 and further consideration from yesterday. And then we'll do we pick up a referral on House Bill 254. So
Mr.
on
Chairman,
219, Mr. Vice Chairman.
having voted on the prevailing side on HB 219, I'd move for immediate consideration.
Motion's been seconded. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. So we are back on the bill. Are there, let's work the bill. Are there amendments? Mr. Vice President.
Line 4 through 5, reinstate all the stricken language,
And remove the new language.
and 5 through 11,
Okay.
remove all of the new language.
Effective that is that's motion second. Effective that is the treasurer will remain the chairman of the committee. Okay, discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion, thank you. Noes are noted. All those, any further amendments? Mr. Vice President.
Page 3, line 23. Write the new language, flip over to page 4. Strike all of the new language on lines 1 through 5.
So what your motion is to strike all the new language beginning, which is one word on page, the very last word on page 3, and then all the new language through line 5 on page 4. Is that correct? All right. Is there a second? Motion's
Mr.
been
Chairman.
made and seconded. Mr. Co-Chair.
Could we have
Or Vice
some
Chair.
discussion? What I'm seeing here is an ex officio member, which would be a legislative member, can get help from the LSO and come to the meetings with the senator or House member and tell me why that's, it seems like a good idea to me.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice President.
First, it doesn't say just ex officio members of the legislature. So this would, the way it currently reads, it would be ex officio, all the members. So those would be the ex officio members from the governor's office, the ex officios from the Wyoming retirement system, ex officios from the treasurer's office. Because it doesn't just specify ex officio from legislative members. So that would be the first part of my concern with the current language is we're staffing the executive branch agencies with their ex officio members. The second part, Mr. Chairman, is our members can always ask for the assistance of LSO as the legislative members on that committee. Or the chairman of that committee could always ask for our staff to come in and provide testimony. So there's no prohibition against our staff assisting either the legislative members or at the request of the chairman of the IFC panel to have our staff come in and testify before the committee. So I think it's unnecessary.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice.
Follow up if I may, but, and tell me, I don't know exactly how the investment funds committee works, but are there times when they meet in what is effectively an executive session because they're talking about portfolio changes that might be market moving moves, if that's a phrase, and that at least if we limited this to a legislative member, that legislative member might want that LSO member there while they're in executive session. So 2 questions: do they have executive sessions, and if it's a legislative member with an LSO staffer, do we need statutory permission for that staffer to attend the legislative member into those executive sessions?
And it's, so my understanding is, in my recollection from when we did the IFC, statutes a couple of years ago, is that they are much like Craig and that they're exempted from the Public Records Act, and it's because it's confidential. And the sovereign, and then the reason that is the sovereign nature of this, and the size of the funds that are invested are actually enough to move the market. So ultimately, you've got some insider trade issues and things like that that might happen, or that could happen from these discussions. And so ultimately, that's a long-winded way of trying to explain that I believe all the meetings of the IFC are executive session. Essentially, it's not termed that way, but we just made them in law so that they are confidential. And as I think that I think the other question is that the way I read on page 4, lines 1, 2, and 3, that the request is that the ex officio non-voting member appointed by the president of the Senate or the Speaker of the House of Representatives. So I think it is limited to that. But I think the problematic area which I think the Vice President has a good point on, is the next lines on 3 through 4, which is the Legislative Service Office may provide staffing assistance. And in our testimony yesterday from the treasurer's office and the executive provide staffing assistance to this. And so I think that the Vice President, makes a pretty decent point. I think that the LSO could always attend, but it would ultimately, because of the nature of the committee, that there has to be an invitation, or at least the consent of, if not the treasurer, at least it would take at least a majority vote of the board to allow that person to attend. So anyway, that's the way I see it and interpret it from what I know about the situation.
Well, so Mr. Chairman, tell me what you and or at least if not, we don't have the other sponsor here. What is it that that you had in mind by including this language? What were you? I presume you're going to get something out of the LSO attendance that you're not going to get out of by requesting assistance from the executive branch.
Well, and I think from the testimony we had yesterday from the co-sponsor and from the treasurer, I mean, it would be that I think one of the things that is important about this bill, as well as the function, is that, these guys come from backgrounds. If you remember some of the testimony, I mean, these are guys that work on some of the one of them is from the largest asset management company in the world. The others all have significant investment in funds that are quite much larger than those in the United States, and so they have a different perspective on investment. And ultimately, I think one of the things that needs to happen is the legislature and these legislative liaisons help represent the people, because this money is invested for various purposes that are different than just asset management. And so I think the point is to make sure that there's a clear communication regarding the purposes of these investments, and the fact the legislature by the Constitution has the authority to set the parameters for these things. So, but at the same time, I think you have to respect the separation of powers on these things.
So, Mr. Chairman, out of that, what I didn't get is what the LSO staffer is going to add. I see what the non-voting ex officio member is going to help convey back to the legislature. What is the LSO assistance to the ex officio legislative non-voting member?
It would be to help with education. But again, there's not, without this language, there's nothing that prevents an LSO staff member from attending if there's consent by the chairman, or at least the board, to them attending. So even without the language, it doesn't prohibit that. It just requires the permission of the board for that additional person to attend.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not hearing that you feel strongly about the language one way or the other, but I mean, I'm willing to support it if you say that you feel that you've got to.
No, I think it's fine. In my discussion with the other co-sponsor and with the treasurer yesterday were that in fact, the co-sponsor thought that they had amended the House so that would be only with the consent of the board or the treasurer in any event. So if that's the case, then the fact that you don't have to have the language in there because anybody can, they can attend if they're invited by the board or the treasurer.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
Motion carries.
Question on the bill.
Is there any other amendments? Ready for question? All those in favor, excuse me, let's go ahead and call the roll.
Thank you, sir. On House Bill 219 as amended, Senator Guru. Senator Hicks.
Aye.
Senator Kinski.
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz. Chairman Perkins.
Aye.
So did you want Sherry to carry this?
Jerry or the vice president?
I'll carry it.
No, I will, obviously, I will carry it and
I can
we'll get to
screw
talk
up
about
with the
this
best
some
of
more.
them.
Yeah. Well, after yesterday, we all seem to have that capability. Next bill for our consideration is a re-referral of House Bill 254, a transportation computer system. Mr. Chairman, welcome. Mr. Chairman, welcome.
Thank you.
So what we like to do is just, since this is just on the appropriation, just give us a 30,000 foot thumbnail of the bill and what it does, and then takes the appropriation and we're looking for rationale and justification for appropriation. I understand that. I don't think this actually has an appropriation. I think it just creates an account. But lead us where this is headed to and help.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, just a couple of brief comments to set the stage, and then the chairman of House Transportation can take you home on it. This is a bill that came out of your Senate Transportation and Military Affairs Committee the other night. And the provision which would allow for a $5 charge on the renewal of driver's licenses actually rests with your Senate Transportation Committee. This bill came to us with nothing in it with respect to anything going into an account that would be set up for the transportation computer system. It was my feeling that I don't like bringing to appropriations a problem without a suggested fix. Now, this charge would not come anywhere near very soon in generating enough to replace this computer system, but it's a great start. And so that's why in the Senate Transportation Committee Standing Committee Amendment, that's where you'll find us bringing that back into the bill. And so that's why we arrived today. That's why I re-referred it to you all so that you were well aware of what is up with this bill and what kind of money that would generate. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, thank you. So I understand creating the account and so, I mean, that's obviously really straightforward. And so then I guess the question that kind of the meat of the bill to me is kind of on, in section 2 of the bill, which, if you start on line 16, the department shall use funds from any appropriate source to fund the replacement of the computer system under this section. They apply for federal funds and then I guess you're going to have by rule and regulation provide for third-party use of the replacement revenue system, computer system. So what they're going to do is, so the two questions I would have is when we talk about any appropriate source, if you could amplify on that. And the second question I would have would be, I think if you go to the bottom of page 2 on top of page 3, you're looking at allowing public or private interest in ability, so they're going to have some access for subscription to the data that's housed on this computer system and in this system. That's the way I read it. So if you could help us understand that and why that's a good idea and what the business model is, that would be helpful for us.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, section 2 originally had wording in that would allow the department to use CARES Act funds that would revert if they reverted. House Appropriations took that out in favor of what the Appropriations Committee has done with all those bills, which is to remove those words in favor of whatever would happen in, say, a special session. So, but they left in any federal funds available, that there may be other sources, federal highway funds, federal funds similar to the old ARPA funds or ERA funds, I apologize. And that's where that comes from, that they can get other funds as needed. Under B, third-party use of the system is somewhat substantial in that. And currently, it's a nominal charge. There's a company that advertises on TV that uses a cartoon fox as its logo. They are into the system. They get the information on vehicles and then they resell it to their customers. And I think each time they get in there, I was told it was $5 is what they were charged. And I think that that's somewhat of a low price. The other one is insurance companies are into the system to check on vehicles, check on driver's license. If you have to do a CDL check. And there's a fair amount of third-party use of the system and the fees are relatively low. So what B does is gives the department the authorization to set those fees at a reasonable amount with the stipulation that half of those go into this account to start paying for the replacement of the computer system. So that's section 2, and section 2 really is the meat of the bill, as you obviously stated, and that's where those 2 sections come from.
Here, go ahead, Senator Simons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering, Representative Burkhart, if that would include our county clerks and some of those that use the system. There's concern in my county anyway, that they will be required to pay fees when they have built up over time a system that works for them. So could you address that concern as well?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Steinmetz, that is not the case. They will not be charged a fee for it. In fact, most of the county computer systems are actually well beyond what this state computer system is. And I think the transition for the counties would be fairly seamless. In fact, it'd probably be beneficial to them to replace the state system. And the County Commissioners Association actually did testify to the Senate Transportation Committee that they favored this to modernize the system, and there would be no charge to them to do that. They wouldn't be back charged for part of the cost or anything.
So, and as go ahead, Senator Simons, do you have any follow-up? As looking at the original bill, as it was in the House, originally there was like a little $5 IT fee that was going to go on vehicle registrations and some things like that, and that all got wiped out. So now they're going to go fund the commission is going to go fund this from whatever source they want to fund it from. And then they are going to, but we were going to set up this fee structure for these private entities and other users to be able to access the system and get certain data on there. Now, I would think that some of that data is confidential, some of that is not confidential. So how does, I mean, I know it's early in the system, system hasn't been created yet. So I get that, but you know, how, you know, have we got, do you think we have appropriate instruction for safeguards of information that's relatively confidential that is, you know, I think in a lot, anyway, just start with that. Do you understand what I'm asking? I'm just worried about private information that goes out there. We all know about identity security and identity theft and fraud and those types of things. So, you know, have you guys had those discussions about the system? And since we're going to allow these private, and they already have access to a lot of it, but just wondered about if they had some discussions about that.
Mr. Chairman, that's one of the reasons to replace the system. I think the current system is built on a program called COBOL, which actually was defunct in the 80s. The security of those kind of systems is very suspect to me. considering the ability of modern hackers and those people. So the upgrade would give them some additional security. Additionally,
Can we create a node in a staking pool at the University of Wyoming for this and house it in block? No, I'm kidding.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to add, that was the reason, if you go over to section 3, part of the reason puts a lot of security issues in place and addresses that they address all of those issues to bring it up to modern security standards. And that's part of the reason for the bill. And that was added in by House Appropriations. The whole thing by consulting with ETS and the University of Wyoming Computer Sciences Department on those things. So that's part of it. Right now, I would say, yeah, there's some security, but it's, I believe, probably mostly an individual who looks over the information and decides that it's a legitimate request or not. And I think that the department, I believe, is one of the Zoomies and can answer that question better than I can.
Okay.
So additionally, Mr. Chairman, and I'll let Chairman Landon address it, the Senate Transportation Committee put back in some additional funding in the form of those fees you mentioned. The fees were originally in the bill. They were moved on the House in order to get it through. There was a $5 fee on driver's license renewals and $5 fee on vehicle registration. The Senate, and I'll let Chairman Landon address that, put the $5 fee on driver's license back in, which I believe, if I recall, is worth about $180,000 a year to the department going into this account.
And is it early now? I mean, so have you looked at surrounding states? Do we know what kind of, how they're doing that with more advanced systems, and what kind of subscriptions they're charging, what kind of money that generates for this account?
You know, Mr. Chairman, we had quite a bit of testimony on that front. It's a little bit all over the map. A couple of states have stood up their own efforts. That is not what we're interested in. We've tried that before. You might remember the trials and tribulations of the Professional Teacher Standards Board. So I, for one, would not be interested in trying to build our own. I think there's good off-the-shelf programs out there that we could avail ourselves to. Our Department of Transportation relies on some nationwide sorts of standards too, that we can do a little homework and get more of that to you. But that's part of the reason that this bill would suggest that we stand up a group that can go out there and really vet this issue and find out. We've been told anywhere from $30 to $60 million to replace this system. We frankly don't know. We can't put a finger on a cost for you at this point. So that's one of the reasons that we stand up a group that will go out and get busy and drill down and find out exactly what we need to have. It'll come to the Transportation Committee and on to all of you so that we can get arms around this. It's a system that's going to fail. I mean, it's a very old system.
The current system, not the system that's contemplated in the bill.
Yeah. I hope
making sure.
I hope the bill won't fail. I know the system, the old COBOL system, it's kind of interesting. There are two guys in the state to the east of us, the one with the panhandle. Two guys that live over there that we contract with to fix this computer, and they want to retire.
They're nearing the end of their life expectancy.
They want to go fishing, and they're not being allowed to retire because they're the only guys anywhere who can fix this system. And so that breaks me out a little bit.
Thank you. You know, Mr. Chairman, at some time I'll tell you the story of how I passed my COBOL programming class in college without ever reading the program.
Is that back in those days
So,
when,
yeah.
when the computer was as big as this room and you had to punch cards and
Yes.
so Mr.
So anyway,
Go ahead.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Vice President.
Question on this subject. Has the Transportation Committee looked at the recommendations from Barry Dunn?
Did you hear that?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, yes, they did look at the recommendations from Barry Dunn study. And that's the $36.7 million price tag that we've referred to. The department has also had other estimates. And frankly, there was one estimate as high as $80,000, which I think I personally disagree with. In effect, the company west of us that's building the large computer centers and does atmospheric research, they're replacing their computers with a new supercomputer, and the cost of it's $35 million. So I think there's a big disconnect there between someone wanting 80 million for a highway department computer system and you're putting one in west of town that literally can put a person on the moon or Mars and bring them back. So that's why there's no direct appropriation or estimate of a cost in here. It was set up in order to encourage the department to use the best possible cost and the best approach. And that's why the University of Wyoming Computer Sciences Department was referred to along with ETS. These are the experts, and hopefully they would do the best possible job and the most cost-effective job.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up, having sat through 2 years of appropriations and dealing with the RIS system and YDOT on this issue, you know, we had several other large tech companies come in, and now there wasn't an RFP, but they certainly alluded to the fact that they could do it significantly cheaper than anything YDOT and their one single issue consultant had come. And so as this moves forward, certainly would encourage them to engage with as many of those other corporate entities that are out there that do this stuff. You know, one of the big discussions we had is why do we need a mainframe? Why couldn't some of this stuff just go on the cloud? Be significantly cost savings through that. And I don't understand it. I just know that there's a lot of discussion to be had about how much this is going to cost and where we should put it and how it should be structured. So if the transportation committees, you know, if we're going to hand this off to you guys, there's a lot of backstories to the discussions that we've had over the last 2 years on this. And I'm more than happy to get rid of it, quite frankly.
Yeah. So Mr. Chairman, regarding that, to the Vice President, I agree with much of what you said, Mr. Vice President. I think that's why we suggest in this bill that we involve several members from several different walks of life in this effort to go out and drill down a little bit. We had testimony in committee from our county clerks reminding us how much they rely on this system with our real IDs, voter identification, and the security of our elections. It's a big deal. So we need to do it right. And in my mind, we need to get started. Regarding the money, the standing committee amendment makes it kind of easy for the Appropriations Committee. We can strip that right back out of there, but it does begin to generate some funding that could be used for the point in time when we feel comfortable putting a new computer system in place. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice President?
And on the funding, if we go to section 2, I have a question here on subsection B. This is where the department, this is for third-party use of the computer. Third-party use for replacement revenues and the information can be at least 50% of the fee implemented for the use shall be deposited in the transportation information account. So if they're using the system, a third party, and they're paying a fee to do that, why wouldn't 100% of that fee go into that account? Where does YDOT want to spend? I thought the purpose was to develop the money and then to pay for the operation and maintenance with third party. And now they're diverting 50% of the money away from the computer to some other purpose. And I don't have my statutes to see, you know, what that would be, but what's the rationale behind that?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice President, the rationale to that was that they will need some amount of money to operate the system for that. And that allows them to split those third-party fees into an operational amount plus an amount to pay for the system. And that was the only logic to it. It was a 50-50 split. That's an easy number. There was no magic to it or anything. It gives them the opportunity to keep maintenance on the system, to do the programming that might be needed to let a new third party in, but at the same time, put money away. And that was really the only logic to it.
Mr. Chairman, we left it in Senate Transportation because we've got to continue to move in a direction of the Department of Transportation, paying its way. And again, that's why the suggested amendment on top of the bill is, some of these services have got to begin in this day and age to pay their way. And we're going to have to run the system, so.
Actually, I think that comment, I think lends credence to what the Vice President just said. If that's the case, seems like all of it should stay there. But anyway, thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, just one more question.
Yeah, go ahead and ask your questions.
On the, Mr. Chairman and Chairman, I'm trying to recollect, but didn't we just raise the driver's license fee just 2 years ago in 2019? And how much was that raised from what it was?
Mr. Chairman, it was 2017, we raised that fee on driver's license, and it was raised $5. Subsequent to that, the length of time between renewals on driver's license was increased from 4 to 5 years. So that's what it is. And this would add another, if the amendment goes through, would add another $5 fee to that.
Mr.
So the
Chairman,
driver's
what's the
license would
total
cost
cost of the
$40.
driver's license renewal if we added this $5?
Mr. Chairman, Vice President, it would go to $40 every 5 years.
And just to follow up, was there any other discussion as to what other areas that might be looked at as far as a fee schedule? I'm just concerned that we're hitting the same pot over and over and over again. And
So yeah, I mean, the other one is maybe you could add a fee for
vehicle
antique
registry.
vehicles. Oh, I'm sorry. Was that too soon, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, I think that would be way out of line. We wouldn't want to go there, but
Antique license plates.
we're going to go away from those metal plates on Pioneers. We're going to go to plastic though. So I think we can still get by. I'm kidding. Honestly, I'm kidding. No, Mr. Vice President, you're spot on. And I appreciate your thoughts. That tomorrow we will take up some interim topics. And one of the subtitles is a global look at every single fee and every single incoming and outgoing. And I think that's important that we get drilled all the way down and be able to come back to all of you and tell you what we've got out there. But certainly, I think a global look at the fees is in order. Again,
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice President, the original bill in the House had also a $5 fee to every vehicle registration. And again, both of these fees, the driver's license and vehicle registration, were removed in the House for the very reasons you talk about. They were increased not that long ago. There was some feeling in the House that maybe the fee on driver's license was more palatable than an annual fee on a vehicle renewal. And that was kind of some of the logic to bring at least just that fee back to give the department some amount of money. The biggest fee obviously would be on vehicle registrations. That would generate, I believe, somewhere near $5 million a year.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I concur with Chairman Burkhart. That way you're only mad once every 5 years instead of every year. If you're going to do it. Thank you,
Mr. Chairman, I regret that this doesn't get us there very quickly, but it at least gives the Appropriations Committee a fund that we can get started and that you can tap at some time in the future. Hopefully we can get those guys from Nebraska to hang in there a little while longer and find out what kind of system we need and get it put in place. But
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Vice President?
No, I'm just thinking, Mr. Chairman, that, this is a security issue and maybe Homeland Security ought to have a role in playing in this system with some some potential federal funding for this.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice President, I have a chart, and I'm pretty sure all the members of the committee have seen what I've referred to as boxing octopuses of all the inner ties between the system and other agencies. Homeland Security is already in the system. They have things in there along with the Department of Health, Unemployment Insurance, Veterans Administration. Pretty much anybody that deals with vital records is touching this system, and that's the importance of it. And frankly, the reason I brought this bill was just bluntly to force the issue. As most of you know, I spent quite a bit of time on appropriations, and from day one, this was a topic of discussion. It needs fixed. This, in effect, forces the issue of we need to fix it.
Okay. Anything else, members?
Yeah, I did.
Go ahead, Mr. Vice Chairman.
This is interesting because Appropriations is supposed to just look at the money, but Appropriations also the home committee for ETS. So I'm going to go a little bit beyond the money to just give you share some thoughts with you. If I had my druthers, well, by way of background, you know, we had every department parade through here, and their systems were all on the verge of catastrophic collapse. And pretty soon we got empathy fatigue, and the bills were hundreds of millions of dollars in maintenance, and then in the middle of it, and I'm going to use some proper names, just forgive me, but in the middle of it, we had Amazon, Google, and Microsoft saying, you know, we've got compilers that'll take it from COBOL to the cloud. This is not an $80 million job, and we've done this in X state, Y state, Z state. Your basic engine of the data of, you know, here's Drew Perkins, whether it's Drew A. Perkins or whatever, you know, any variations on his name, spelled, misspelled, but there's an identification number, voter record, driver record, hunting record, you know, DFS, DOH, you name it, across the board. And it's that engine, and then everything else just hooks into it and it's all on the cloud. But meanwhile, here's this department. No, we want our own system. This department, no, we feel a lot better about having our own system. You know, please deposit $50 million. And so, you know, we put the brakes on that, and I don't know exactly where we are now, but I know we're not moving until we feel a little bit more comfortable. I will tell you, they did the Dunbarry study, and I lost on our IT subcommittee with how I wanted to do it, which is the way I do it with my own business, which is I'd bring in Amazon and tell me what you think. I'd bring in Google, tell me what you think, take notes, the next one, and the consultants, and you learn everything you need to learn, and then you put a draft RFP together, and then you send that out to all those companies to provide public input. Because that RFP, as you know as well as I do, depending on the design, you can knock out a lot of options. You can exclude a lot of people that might have a good solution for you. Well, it turned out that RFP, and I hope ETS doesn't replicate this, that RFP had a kicker in it from A&I that says, by the way, if you participate in any way in the design of this RFP, you cannot respond to the work. And so I'm asking when ETS goes out for further RFPs that they get rid of that clause, and that they issue the RFP in draft form and solicit feedback on the RFP, so that somebody who goes through, be it Google, and goes through there and says, you know, the way they specified this, we wouldn't be able to respond, but if they just say it this way, we could actually submit a proposal. And so I'm okay with a $5 fee going into an account that can't be spent until they come back to the legislature, just to start accruing the money. Everything else, bringing in the University of Wyoming, all that, personally, I'd get rid of it. And when we go out to the floor, that might be an amendment. Because now, I mean, we're trying to get ETS as a new young agency up to the level of maturity they really need to be to deliver a well-thought product across the entire enterprise. And so now here we're going to, that's the way we're kind of going, as their home committee. And now this bill says, no, we're going to have a committee of University of Wyoming and ETS and the Department of Transportation, and we're hitting the green light for DOT. And so we're kind of moving away from an enterprise-wide solution with ETS being at the heart of it, being the agency we hope they can become, that they'd like to become. And so I don't know if that's just my feedback on it, as to where we are on approach. And other than that, I like the bill.
So, Mr.
So the
Chairman,
question is, do you agree? Wouldn't
Yeah,
you
just,
agree? Thank you.
boy, I agree. You know, I remember sitting in your chair about 5-6 years ago, and that's when we brought ETS into the world, and I had some reluctance, to be honest. I really wondered if that was the right thing to do, and I still wonder. But I'll look forward to the debate down on the floor. I think everything you said, Senator, is spot on. We've got to figure out a way to go forward here, and if it's collective, I think that's terrific. I think this group that was suggested by the chairman of the House Committee, which includes a couple of appropriations members, a couple of transportation members, that's a legitimate recommendation too, and I think we just need to decide which way we want to go. But one thing that I've been convinced just in the last handful of weeks, this is a system that we do need to pay attention to, and it needs to be prioritized somehow. And the question this morning is whether or not we want to begin putting something into a fund that we could use later. So. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Senator Kinski?
No, just as an FYI, my wallet was stolen while I was out of state, and YDOT sent me a PDF of a temporary license very quickly. I was impressed by what they were able to do. And the $30 fee, I was amazed. I thought, that's really all it takes every 5 years is $30. It seems like such a small price to pay, and knowing the need. I mean, I'm okay with the fee, and I'll justify that to any voter if it goes in place. It just, every 5 years, $30 or $35. It seems like a heck of a bargain to me. I think YDOT is starting to get that customer service ethic. In another 150 years, they're going to be right there, right there.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other? Thank you. Have we got other people testifying this bill? We got people in the room?
Mr. Chairman, members of YDOT are here, but I believe that they're only here to answer questions should the committee have any.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for YDOT? Doesn't appear, is there anybody in this room that is here to testify in this bill? All right, we'll go ahead and close off public comment. Members, what's your pleasure? Bill's been moved. I'll second it. Discussion? I would offer an amendment. It has to do with the appropriation. And that is, my amendment would be on line 23. To the top of page 3, you would strike the words at least 50% of. You'd strike that and then just simply capitalize the A. And the effect would be that any fee implemented for use of the computer system shall be deposited in the transportation information account system. So basically all the fees go there.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Any other amendments? Did you get that, Karen? Okay. All right, let's take a question on the bill.
On House Bill 254 as amended, Senator Guru. Senator Hicks. Senator Kinski.
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz. Chairman Perkins.
Aye.
5 ayes.
Okay. Right, Mr. Chairman Landon, are you carrying this on the floor? All right, thank you. All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, would you like to adjourn?